Right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Virtual Coffee with Ben. My name is Ben Blackman, and I'm the Director of Development for RIDGE. That stands for Royal Innovation Design Group, which is a group of innovation consultants based in St. Petersburg, Florida. Before we get started, as always, I want to encourage everybody to go to the RIDGE YouTube channel and our Facebook page. You can hit the like button, share all of our great content, and schedule your own Virtual Coffee with Ben, which means you could be on the show if you like, or we can just have a private conversation about how RIDGE can help your company innovate more effectively. This show talks about how companies innovate, strategically plan for the future, and create a strong culture for their employees. Today, I'm really excited to welcome our guest, Andreas Calabrese. He is the founder and managing director of Zetta Ampersand. It's a Tampa-based firm that specializes in automation, innovation, operational design, to help organizations that are looking to embrace digital transformation. It's a mouthful. Andreas, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Awesome. Well, I always like to start these interviews by doing a little bit of background information. And I've seen that you have the opportunity in your past to study at universities, both in Europe and in Canada, where you received degrees in analytical finance and international business management. You're like an international man of mystery.
Well, curious. I started with electrical engineering, and then
there you go. The list keeps growing.
Down the train down to analytical finance.
So you've been all over. I'm curious, how did you end up in Tampa, Florida? And what opportunity did you see in the marketplace that led you to starting Zetta Ampersand?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. I mean, Tampa, but maybe Florida in general.
Yeah.
I might have been a bit early in terms of 2 years early, but it seems like a lot of my compatriots in my former industry of venture capital and private equity seem to be finding Florida as home, and that there's a lot of opportunity there as well. So, anytime my background is that after graduating from university, in all these cool places that you mentioned, I ended up working for an American venture capital fund that was investing in what we called hardware-enabled deep tech. So wasn't a whole lot of Snapchat and things like that. This was pretty hardcore systems, like things that would automate, say, a whole steel mill, or something that would balance the power load of a power grid, or systems like that. So that was really exciting. It was really interesting to get an insight into these kind of more industrial companies, but more so, it showed me the importance and the focus of process in industrial environments. Regardless of what it is, whether it's an industrial software company, whether they're making steel, whether they're making robot parts, there's this focus on efficiency and kind of a linear thinking of every step and knowing what every step entails. And I think that's has certainly carried into the work that I do at Zetta Ampersand. But to answer your question of how Tampa, I was previously working for another tech company that we had invested in as their CFO, and we opened an office in Tampa, and I'd never been there before, knew nothing about it except for the Buccaneers and maybe Busch Gardens, but that's about it. But after coming there, I saw the economic opportunity and felt that Tampa and Florida in general was undervalued.
And so how did Zetta Ampersand come about? Where did you come up with the name? When did it start? And kind of what was the driving force to say, hey, I need to create something on my own?
Well, it came more so from, I think, a lot of, you might have a lot of individual stories of people starting businesses for their own, maybe personal reasons, or there's some sort of reflection, or they see they can do something better. But mine was quite different than that. Mine was simply that I was so interested in the technology that surrounds automation. So, from all the things that you introduced that Zetta Ampersand does, the simple way to boil it down is that we're given a problem and we try and find ways to use automation to solve that problem. That's pretty much the high level of it. And of course it gets very detailed, but having experienced frustrations with lack of automation as a CFO, and then also being able to follow this technology and really see how fast it was evolving, it almost felt as something I had to do rather than something I wanted to do.
Gotcha. So we talked about what you guys do. It's automation, innovation, operational design. You mentioned that you work a lot with industrial companies. Is that kind of solely your market, or are there other types of companies that you work with? And then what are the type of challenges that they're typically coming to you saying, hey, these are my problems, can you help? What are you typically solving for?
That's a great question. Our customer base is really, really varied. And actually, we don't actually have that many customers in like the industrial side or the production side. And I can explain why. The reason why is that, let's say you have, there's a difference between physical automation and digital automation. So a semi truck, right? There's a lot of talk of automating semi trucks on the highway, how much that displaces. Well, a semi truck still has to follow the laws of physics. So you can automate a semi truck, but it can't drive any faster than the driver who is driving it. Its advantage is maybe that it can drive 24 hours a day rather than 12, but it can't really, it has to use the same roads, has to go through the same tolls. You still need to unpack it and pack it. So the gains are limited slightly. In a digital environment, you have no laws of physics. So you can have efficiency gains of 1,000%, 2,000%, 3,000%. So actually the areas where we have most of our customers are, I would say mostly service companies, professional service companies who deal in some sort of process and where they're repeating a step over and over again, where they're repeating some portion of their value delivery over and over again. And that's the areas we usually attack with automation.
Gotcha. Well, I know in reading a little bit about you that you are extremely focused on value creation and you want to ensure that you're using data to inform the approach that you're taking with your clients. So I'm curious, what sorts of data are the most relevant to you and your team in determining how you can have a lasting impact through the work that you're doing?
That's a great question. And I would say that might actually be equal in terms of motivation for founding Zetta Ampersand as anything else was. Being able to calculably show the value of what we were doing, of being able to go to a client and say, we're not charging you per hour and discovering whatever problems we want to find. What we're doing instead is we're productizing exactly what we give to you. So when we go to a client, the way that we charge is that we actually calculate the amount of human capital time that we're saving with all of the automation and process redesigning that we do. And then we charge a small fraction of what that would be over the course of a year. So the idea being that every client we interact with has instant value from day one that they have on a piece of paper, that they know exactly what they got, rather than trying to fluff and figure out how to deliver a service that's valuable. I just had to have something to say, look, this is exactly our value.
So are you relying on like a lot of data inputs from the client that they're giving to you? What are like those must-haves for you guys to start putting in those calculations on the savings?
It depends. It depends because our projects are so varied. So that might be something that's also a little different, is that a lot of companies are really focusing on one very specific thing and one very specific type of action. And that's usually product companies. And it makes sense because you want to target a small market and you can use all the data that you get out of selling one product to improve the product, not from a bunch of different sources. But in that we're delivering a service, we can be really flexible. So we actually have a very specific thing of we're trying to target automation, but we're working in all sorts of different functions of the company as well as in different industries. So yeah.
You mentioned it before that automation is kind of the cornerstone of Zetta Ampersand, right? That's everything's about automation, but that takes on many forms, as you addressed as well. I'm curious how AI plays a role in the work that you're doing, but then also there's a new technology that's gaining a lot of traction, which is robotic process automation, RPA. So I'm curious what you can tell us about both those things, how AI and RPA are informing the work that you're doing.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
dumb it down for people like me that really don't know much about it other than, reading the headlines.
Right. No, exactly. And when you were reading headlines, you probably started to notice like, hey, there's a lot of buzz about RPA and I've never heard about it.
Yeah.
It's very, but like when you start to look into it and you start to understand the growth of the technology, it's a little crazy. So to start, artificial intelligence benefits that tool and benefits our ability to use automation. So this robotic process automation is probably the main tool that we're looking into, especially when we work with larger clients who have systems of where they're not very nice at connecting to things. And basically what this system is it's a program you have on your computer. And what you do is you hit play or record. And then you do something on your computer, do a function, say sort through emails or upload a document or something like that. And then you hit stop once you're done. And then that program has recognized what you're doing via looking at you. So it's looking at what's happening on the screen, and it's trying to identify context clues. So it's using the exact same technology that, say, a Tesla car uses as it's going down the road to identify, okay, this is a yellow line, this is a white line, this is a stop sign. In a similar way, what robotic process automation is doing is it's doing the same thing, but it's doing it on your computer screen. And what that means is that, let's say you want to onboard a bunch of customers and you have two different offices and you want to do it the same way. Rather than having an individual experience of a human going back and forth with your client and having them request documents and send things out for signature and send things internally, all that kind of stuff, what you do is you would just set a bot to know what documents it needs to request, know who to send them to, know what other tasks are critical for getting a customer onboarded, and then can pass the conversation off to someone with a full detail of everything about that customer, everything they've been through so far, and where exactly they are in the process.
So that's something that you at Zetta Ampersand are implementing for your clients, like setting up that process and those bots to make the process more efficient.
Exactly. So a customer, partner, client would come to us and say, hey, our problem is, here's our real world problem, is that we're not having our customers be onboarded the same way, and we're having different satisfaction scores from our customers in two different offices. And then our job is to go in and, obviously with help of the company, figure out, okay, well, what's causing that problem? But then where we take the lead is, how can we redesign the process to eliminate anything that may have just kind of got thrown in over the years? But then also, how can we implement automation, but as little automation as possible to make the greatest impact on that process?
Makes sense. Well, it'll be a trend that's really interesting to watch. And it's cool that you guys are already implementing it with your clients. If you're just joining us, you are watching Virtual Coffee with Ben. My name is Ben Blackman. I'm the Director of Development for Ridge, this Royal Innovation Design Group. I'm joined today by Andreas Calabrese. He is the founder and managing director of Zetta Ampersand. If you like what you're hearing, you want more content, you can go to the Ridge YouTube channel or Facebook page and stay tuned for more conversations just like this one. Andreas, as we start the new year, we just turned the page to 2021. I'm curious what your expectations are for 2021, just in terms of the business landscape in the Tampa area, and then what particular trends you might be keeping an eye on. You seem like somebody who has kind of always got their finger on the pulse. So, what are you looking at? What are you studying? And then is there anything new in store for Zetta Ampersand this year?
Certainly. Well, the first way I would answer your question is that the sun's going to come up, most likely. There is some small statistical significance that it wouldn't, but I'm going to bet on that to start. And from there, we're humans, business is run by humans. Humans are biological machines. Biological machines don't ever really do anything the same because they are very good at taking in new information and making a decision for the first time. So I don't know what's going to happen. But I will say that there are a few trends that I think will be hard to buck. Work from home is obviously a trend that's going to stay with us. But what will also come with us is processes that are going to be built in a work from home environment. And for the majority of companies, that has never, ever, ever been done before. I mean, even the concept of keeping a really focused mind on how all of your processes are organized, keeping documentation of your processes, that's already something that's a bit new age. So it'll be very interesting to see how processes that were created during a 12 to 16 month period of when people were working from home then interact with processes that are created in the office or processes that were previously in place. And if people do return to office, how do those things commingle, and how do you manage all of the different tools you had to add, all of the different roles you had to change? There's going to be a big moment of awakening, and I don't think it's we're going to go back to the way things were. This is going to be an evolution into a new structure of organizations. that's a little bit more of a hybrid model.
Yeah. Now, does that bring opportunity to Zetta Ampersand? Are you going to be involved in helping those companies determine those processes for the work at home folks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've already, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were providing quite a bit of counsel in terms of, okay, what technological tools can we use to try and decrease the amount of risk of having people work out of the office to start with, as well as someone who had worked from home for 3 years before and had worked in a fully remote company previously. Just how do we go about this? What are the things that worked? What are the things that don't work? What do you need to be mindful of that's different when you're trying to organize a digital team rather than a physical one? So it's for us, things are looking very interesting in the future because I don't think we're going to go backwards in terms of our automation capability. So it should be an exciting year for everybody in our space.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to keep track of how you guys are doing throughout the year. While we have you on, I always like to get advice from people that are really passionate about certain subjects. And I know that you have a strong passion for startups, having done it yourself. So I'm hoping that you could share some advice to anybody who's watching who might currently be running a startup or might be contemplating going in that direction in the future.
Yeah, why? And that's not in a cynical way. It's the why. Your why should be an entire journal's book, basically, of a reason as to why starting a company is important, as to why foregoing all of the structure, resources, and support of doing what you want to do inside of maybe another work environment, or doing it as a nonprofit, or these things of the why. I will say that between American and Swedish founders, because living in Sweden, that's where I had a lot of interaction as a venture capitalist, I would say that Americans tend to like the glitz and glam of what they perceive entrepreneurship to be a little bit more than where in Sweden, everybody who's coming to your door trying to start a company is purely passionate about the technology and the company they're working on. So I think that's super important. That's incredibly, incredibly important, because otherwise what happens is, let's say you do have a little bit of success. Let's say you do raise a bit of capital, and you start to frame yourself as that you're in some sort of level of success. But what you have to realize is that your level of success doesn't even start until you're up playing against the largest companies in that industry. Mm-hmm. So the why is really, really important. The why of who you are as a person, the why of what type of people you need around you, the why of the way you organize your day. I mean, everything. Because this is not a game. This is not a joke. This is serious. This is what entire governments are trying to support people to do, is to start companies and to engage in economic activity. So it's incredibly important.
Great. Well, thank you for that insight. I appreciate it. And I can obviously tell that you are very passionate about it. So hopefully people will take heed of your advice and make sure that they have the why.
They probably won't, but they'll think about it afterwards and see that's probably a good idea.
Sometimes you got to fail forward, right? I always like to wrap up with what we call the Been Good Times Fast Five. It's 5 quick questions that will get us to know you a little bit better on a personal level. So the first thing I always like to ask is what is your favorite thing about the Tampa area? But I'm also going to add in, you just mentioned you spent some time in Sweden. So what's your favorite thing about Tampa? And then also, what do you miss most about Sweden?
Ooh, what I miss most about Sweden is probably, I would say probably all the people. I mean, it was, I'd become such a part of the technology and startup ecosystem there that you really felt like you had a really good support network. And Tampa's getting there. It's just a bit more fractured. And I think just by the geometry of Tampa Bay, it's not all in one place. It's technically 4 to 5 different smaller hubs. So I think that adds to it a bit. But what I love about Tampa is sun, because in Sweden, that's not a luxury we have from November to sometimes November again.
Yeah.
So,
great answer.
Yeah. The sunshine I really like. And yeah, it just feels like there's a lot of opportunity. It feels a little Wild West-ish in terms of technology. So it feels like you're really at the beginning of something, which is cool.
Interesting. Now, if I give you a free ticket to travel anywhere in the world, and let's just assume that there were no restrictions based on COVID, where would you go?
Ooh, I would probably say North Korea.
Interesting.
No travel restrictions, ability to go anywhere, ability to experience something. I think North Korea would be, for me, would be fascinating.
I was not expecting that answer. I don't know if anybody would give me that answer, but I have to dive in a little bit more. So explain to me, what specifically you would want to be able to see and do.
I think it would just be so interesting to me to see that there's a segment of, I wouldn't say society, but civilization probably, that has completely disagreed with the notions that the rest of us have accepted.
Mhm.
So, that's probably not by choice of the citizens of North Korea, but it would still be very interesting to see, because these type of, rogue freak governments or freak civilizations don't really last that long typically. I mean, in the grand scheme of civilization, they're usually quite short-lived. So while they exist, typically there's not much written about them. It's pretty hard to learn about them. And then when you're trying to read about them in the future, it's very difficult to get a good sense of what it was like. So for me, I think, visiting countries like that would be very, very interesting, and also provide a perspective of, of how fortunate I am to be born where I was born, to have the opportunities that I had. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
what I would say.
that would be really interesting. You and Dennis Rodman just chumming it up in North Korea would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't think I'd hang out with the leadership of North Korea that much. It would certainly be just interesting to see the whole thing, to
Yeah.
have an informed perspective, even if it's just
Yeah,
looking at
that's
the country.
a fascinating take I hadn't really considered, but yeah, well, maybe one day we'll see. Question 3 is, what is your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Flight of the Intruders.
Okay. It's an
Yes.
old one, right?
Oh yeah, it was one of the first VHSs I ever had. Played it
Yeah.
hundreds of times.
Fantastic. Question 4, if I was just pushing you on a stage at a talent show, I said, you got to go on and perform and do something, what would you do? What would be your talent?
Ooh, probably. I don't have that many talents that'd be that cool in front of people. So maybe like an original oration.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
I think you'd be good at that.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to see that. And
That's about it.
Finally, my last question is who is your hero or your biggest inspiration, and why?
Ooh, that's actually changed quite a bit, and it changes quite frequently. I guess that's natural as someone progresses
Yeah.
through life. Originally, I would say it was probably Peter Lynch, the former investor of the Magellan Fund, who obviously with Jeff Vinnick came in and ran the Magellan Fund after Peter Lynch. He's one of the most legendary value investors in history. But just also the way that he presented himself. When I was younger, I really wanted to present myself to people in the same way that he did. But I would say that most of my inspirations or heroes are for a specific thing they've done rather than a whole thing. So I really like, certain investors' takes on certain things, or certain business leaders' takes on the way that they run their company. So I have very specific things for like specific areas, like, oh, this guy's really good at this. This guy's really good at this. This girl is really good at this.
Yeah, well, that's good. You got a diversified portfolio of inspiration.
Day one.
Always good. Well, Andreas, thanks so much for hopping on. Before we go, though, where can our viewers go to learn more about the work that you're doing at Zetta Ampersand?
Absolutely. So they can go to zettaampersand.com. Unfortunately, most of our casework is confidential, so we can't release a whole ton of what we're doing all the time. But we have some things planned for 2021 that we're going to be able to show the world a little bit more of what we're doing, which we're really excited about.
Fantastic. Well, we'll be sure to let everybody know as much as we can to check out all the great stuff that you're doing. Really excited to see what 2021 has in store for you. And again, thank you so much for hopping on. If you're interested in learning more about Ridge, of course, you can go to our website, which is ridge.com. That's RIDG.com. And then again, you can go to our YouTube or Facebook pages as well. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. Andreas, thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.